The Indiana Jones series was always intended to be a trilogy from the very beginning, with the third film ending with our main hero quite literally riding off into the sunset. But because Hollywood loves cashing in on our nostalgia, let's make a fourth one. And hey, Indiana Jones gave Pirates of the Caribbean something to rip off later by rebooting the franchise years on when nobody gave a shit anymore. Twice!
Are you nuts?
Lucas had considered the possibility of a fourth movie as far back as 1990, just 1 year after the release of the third one, so he was always determined to fuck it all up. But he felt like he couldn't think of an adequate plot device to drive the story, and so he left the series to end as it was. Spielberg was also hesitant to continue, as he felt satisfied with his work on the trilogy and wanted to mature as a filmmaker, stating that any involvement he would have on a potential fourth film would be strictly as a producer. And we saw how well that worked out for Jurassic Park. While working on the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, a prequel TV series following the adventures of a young Indy in which Harrison Ford reprised his role as a narrator, Lucas realised that this opened up the possibility of a film with an older Indy set in the 1950s, with aliens as the plot device. Why am I even surprised by anything George Lucas says anymore?
Wait a minute.
However, Harrison Ford refused to return to the series if they went with this angle. And Spielberg also resisted the idea of including aliens, especially because he had already made several movies exploring the idea of extraterrestrials and didn't want to repeat himself. However, Lucas, being the self-absorbed stubborn bastard that he always is, came up with a story anyway, which Jeb Stewart turned into a script in May 1994. Lucas also wanted Indy to get married, and after learning that Stalin was interested in psychic warfare, he decided to have Soviets as the villains and the aliens to have psychic powers. Can someone please take away George Lucas's typewriter?
You're a hard man to read.
However, the release of a tiny film you may have heard of called Independence Day immediately ruined Lucas's plans, as Spielberg refused to make another alien invasion film. Lucas complied, choosing to focus on the Star Wars prequels instead, because apparently he just really wants to fuck aliens, and plans for a fourth Indy film were officially canned. No, just kidding, of course they were gonna do it anyway!
You got it, pal.
Spielberg was eventually persuaded to consider returning by his kids, who would constantly pester him about when he would make another Indiana Jones film. In 2000, Ford, Lucas, Spielberg, Frank Marshall and Kathleen Kennedy all met up whilst presenting Ford with a Lifetime Achievement Award, and they decided they wanted to enjoy the experience of making an Indiana Jones film again. Spielberg was also keen to return to something more light-hearted after a period of making back-to-back dark films for several years. Lucas eventually convinced Spielberg to use his aliens plot point in the story by saying they were interdimensional rather than extraterrestrial. So practically, Steven Spielberg was bullied into making this film.
What is the point of all this?
Lucas also suggested using the crystal skulls to ground the idea. M. Night Shyamalan was then hired to write the screenplay. Yeah, where Indy's son will turn out to be a giraffe in disguise.
Please don't be foolish.
With filming set to begin in 2002, but he quit after feeling too overwhelmed to write a sequel to a franchise that had inspired him so much. And he also claimed it was difficult to get Ford, Spielberg and Lucas to unanimously agree on any of his ideas. Well, don't make them stupid then! Well, I mean, Lucas might accept them, but the others will be harder to convince.
Drop dead.
Other writers were then approached, including Steve Gaghan, Aaron Sorkin, Steven Zalian, and Tom Stoppard, but all declined for one reason or another before finally landing on Shawshank Redemption director Frank Darabont. Darabont was quickly hired, turning in a full treatment titled Indiana Jones and the City of Gods. The story reportedly would have been set in the 50s, much like the final movie, with Indy being pursued by ex-Nazis because fuck knows the franchise can't get enough of the Nazis! Spielberg reportedly loved the script, but Lucas was more hesitant and the lazy git finally took over writing duties himself, rewriting the entire script to his own liking, which frustrated Darabont so much that he quit the film in protest.
Ouch.
Spielberg and Lucas realised that there was no way they could avoid using the Cold War due to the 50s setting, and realised that this would make using the Soviets as the villains rather than the Nazis much more plausible. Furthermore, after his experience making Schindler's List, Spielberg didn't feel too comfortable about satirising the Nazis anymore, and even Harrison Ford agreed that the use of Nazis as bad guys was well worn out by this point. However, by 2004, the script still wasn't finished, and Ford was starting to get annoyed by the constant delays. He even stated that if the movie wasn't made by 2008, the filmmaker should cancel the project altogether, prompting Spielberg and Lucas to put production into overdrive. Lucas hired a new writer called Jeff Nathanson to co-write the story with him, whose writing credits include, "Oh my god, I'm in for hell!"
I'm sorry.
Nathanson turned in a new story called Indiana Jones and the Atomic Ants, which sounds like an episode of Powerpuff Girls, before David Koepp of Spider-Man and Jurassic Park fame was brought in to turn this into a full screenplay, originally titled Destroyer of Worlds, which sounds like a Thor comic book. But this was finally changed to the title we all know and hate. Ford also convinced Koepp to include more jokes about Indy's age into the script, believing that they would help reduce the American paranoia about aging, and he also refused to dye his hair, arguing that Indy's appeal wasn't in his youth, but in his imagination and resourcefulness. And it would certainly help with writing this review!
40 like 80?
When it came to casting, many actors from previous entries were asked to come back, but not all of them were too keen. John Rhys Davies was asked to return as Salah, but he refused after finding out that he would only appear in the wedding scene, feeling that this would cheapen the character. Sean Connery was also approached for a cameo appearance as Indy's dad, but he turned it down as he was busy enjoying his retirement, so they killed him off screen instead. Amusingly, though Spielberg fully intended for Karen Allen to reprise her role as Marion, she wasn't even told that the movie was being made until the director called her to come to New Mexico to begin filming. And she reacted as well as can be expected.
I learned to hate you in the last 10 years.
The script was also kept under lock and key to prevent any leaks prior to release. Both John Hurt and Ray Winston said that before they signed on to the movie, they received a visit from one of Spielberg's publicists, who arrived at their house, gave them a screenplay to read, and once they were finished, they took it back and got on a plane back to America. Is this Hollywood or the CIA?
How do you know about it?
When casting the role of Indy's son Mutt Williams, Shia LaBeouf was Spielberg's only choice, having been impressed with his performance in Holes. And LaBeouf eagerly signed on, being a huge fan of the series, even agreeing without reading the script. Because that always works out.
Dead end.
But unfortunately, this goodwill didn't last long, as Spielberg and LaBeouf didn't get along at all. The director was reportedly constantly telling him off for doing immature things on set, such as picking his nose or turning up late. And whilst promoting the movie, LaBeouf heavily criticised the film to the press, saying, "I feel like I dropped the ball on the legacy that people loved and cherished. You get to monkey swinging and things like that, and you can blame it on the writer and you can blame it on Steven, but the actor's job is to make it come alive and make it work, and I couldn't do it, so that's my fault, simple." I just love that he's given this massive opportunity to work with Harrison Ford, Steven Spielberg, George Lucas. He's in Indiana Jones, one of the biggest franchises of all time, and he's told off for picking his nose.
You gotta be kidding me.
According to LaBeouf, these comments badly damaged his relationship with Spielberg, as he was promptly fired from any future sequels and was never hired for any of his films again. He told me, "There's a time to be a human being and have an opinion, and there's a time to sell cars. It brought me freedom, but it also killed my spirits, because this was a dude I looked up to like a sensei." Even Harrison Ford criticised LaBeouf's behaviour, saying, "I think he was a fucking idiot. As an actor, I think it's my obligation to support the film without making a complete arse of myself. Shia is ambitious, attentive and talented, and he's learning how to deal with a situation which is very unique and difficult." But hey, Spielberg would get his own back in the end, because the girl who punches Shia in the diner, that's actually Spielberg's daughter. I like to think they did that on purpose.
One of the scorpions just stung you. Am I gonna die?
How big?
Huge.
Good.
Filming for the picture began in June 2007, but unlike the previous films, the entire movie was shot in the US, as Spielberg didn't want to be too far away from his family. Furthermore, the producers initially insisted on using practical stunt work for the action scenes, as on previous films. However, as production went on, Lucas pushed for more extensive use of sound stages, green screens and CGI, a technique he had used on the Star Wars prequels, insisting that this would be much more practical and save time. And it shows.
Oh shit.
He even wanted to make Indy's whip computer generated, and it was only when Ford stopped him that he changed his mind.
Why is it like that?
Production wrapped in October 2007, and Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was released on May the 22nd the following year. It was a huge hit, grossing $790 million worldwide, becoming the highest grossing film in the series and the second biggest moneymaker that year, only behind The Dark Knight. But believe it or not, reviews at the time were actually quite positive. Yeah, this was another Phantom Menace case, where despite the movie's reputation as one of the worst sequels ever made, most people at the time were actually pretty nice to it. But as time went on, the movie's image became significantly worse, many criticising the dialogue, story, pacing and overuse of CGI, and it's universally labelled by fans and critics alike as the franchise's low point. And I can see why. Just look at how the movie begins. I have never seen a movie openly tell you it's going to suck with the opening shot before. That is impressive. But hey, let's give the movie some credit. Some of the stories actually aged surprisingly well.
Russians.
But then again,
Where is it you would imagine I am from, Dr. Jones?
Well, the way you're sinking your teeth into those W's, I should think maybe Eastern Ukraine.
whew. I just don't understand the thought process of making this. In the 21st century, at what point do you think, oh, you know what we're missing? Another Indiana Jones movie. Yeah, we'll make it straight after Teen Wolf 3.
This ain't gonna be easy.
Not as easy as it used to be.
Well, you used to make good movies.
3 times.
The cinematography looks so strange. It rarely looks like the actors are ever actually at the location. It almost doesn't even look like a real film. It looks like leaked test footage. This was an expensive blockbuster. Of course, it wouldn't be an Indiana Jones movie without someone double-crossing him. When it's the 4th time they've done it, it's so tedious. To the point the movie even knows it and doesn't care.
So what are you, a triple agent?
Look, this is why I'm not a fan of these reboots where the actors still have a main role despite being considerably older. It's just not exciting to see an old man on these adventures. I'm constantly concerned for his health. Harrison Ford was 64 years old in this. It also doesn't work in the story because we're supposed to believe that a 64-year-old man is still somehow able to perform shit like this. It doesn't work and it looks ridiculous. There is one of the most absurd scenes in movie history. Yeah, you know the one. Indy manages to survive a nuclear blast that wipes out this entire test site by hiding inside a fucking fridge. This was actually ripped from the original Back to the Future script where Marty and Doc were going to use a fridge to time travel near a nuclear bomb site before it was changed to the DeLorean. Yeah, there was a reason it was changed, George. Yeah, I'm blaming George. You know George Lucas wrote this.
There is no other explanation.
I refuse to take anything in this movie seriously now. Everyone has made fun of it. It's become a meme, and rightfully so. It's insane. Indy ends up temporarily losing his job, and Jim Broadbent decides to loudly yell his business right near all of his students for some reason. Shia LaBeouf shows up somehow knowing that he's on this train and needs to talk to him, so... Wait, did Indy emergency stop the train? Did Shia get on the train? Oh, who cares? And after 4 movies, after what, 20 years of Indy experiencing magical arcs, magical healing grails, magical evil, satanic murderous cults, he still doesn't believe in magic!
Power, right. So there's some kind of power. What's the power?
I don't know, kid. It's just a story.
How does this happen every time? It's been 20 or 30 years! You've seen magic every time and then someone says, oh, this is going on, and he's like, it's just a myth. Oh no, that's just silly poppycock. It doesn't work this many times!
Honor the gods.
No. God's head is not like that, man.
Depends on who your god is.
Ah, let us pray.
You assuming I'm a human, what I gotta do to get it through to you?
Shia LaBeouf is so bad in this. He tries so desperately to be tough, but it looks hilarious.
Shut up. That's my mother you're talking about. Alright? It's my mother.
And then other times he tries desperately to be the hilarious comic relief, but it's painfully unfunny.
Whoa, wait. Stop. Uh-huh. I'm ready.
That could have been really funny, but it was just delivered so poorly. Alright, the amount of emotion in his face here is pretty good. I guess he's allowed one good moment. But yeah, apparently we're now in a Looney Tunes episode.
I think I just saw something!
It's an acting class! I'm on my way! But they really try to turn Shia LaGoddamn-Buff into an action star. It's actually kind of sweet. He can't even do the most basic parts right.
Mom, there's a cliff!
Why did he yell so dramatically and then she just calmly and casually turned? I don't even know whether to blame him for the read, the director for the direction, the editor. I'm going to blame Shia.
It's a matter of opinion!
The movie also spends way too long expecting us to not see the twist coming that he's Indy's son. Yeah, we're apparently not meant to put 2 and 2 together that his mum is Marion. Come on, guys, we saw her name in the credits, for Christ's sake. There are, I guess, some nice subtle moments as Shia is trying to help and Indy notices he actually has some decent detective work.
2 sets of prints.
Same size, could have been the same person twice.
Not bad, kid.
Before they discover KSI's skull. That's nice. It turns out Indy abandoned Marion, so they hate each other now. Yes, this joins the list of breaking up couples nobody wanted to see broken up. And it also invents the trope of them getting back together years later, yay! And yeah, we've apparently entered an episode of Most Haunted now. The issue with this story is that Marion comes across as a complete bitch. Why didn't she tell Indy for 20 plus years that he had a son? She literally says she remarried when the baby was 3 months old, and she never even told him that he wasn't really his father. She's a terrible woman! And she paints Indy as the prick.
think you gave up your vote on who I marry when you decided to break it off a week before the wedding.
Sit down, love. You kept his son away from him for 2 decades. And weirdly, considering he's only just found out he's a father 20 seconds ago, he sure does step in to try to have authority over him incredibly quickly.
There must have been plenty of women for you over the years.
There were a few, but they all had the same problem.
Yeah, what's that?
They weren't you, honey.
The lying, manipulative type. This action doesn't make any sense. Surely their driver could just move closer, but at several points he could have easily just shift both legs onto their car before they're separated too far apart. But no, gotta get some dick jokes in there. And come on, look, I like to see Shia LaBeouf get beat up just as much as the next guy, but at least make the choreography look good. It is pretty funny how he prepares to do something badass, but then gets caught in a tree branch. I'll give him that. Maybe I just find it funny to see Shia LaBeouf in pain. But it's bullshit that nobody gets injured or killed in this crash. Yeah, bollocks. This guy gets eaten alive for some Wicker Man special effects. And then they literally drive into a tree that then slowly lowers them down into the water. I'm gonna kill myself! And they survive not 1, not 2, but 3 waterfalls. How is the movie that's part 4 of a franchise which involved a holy grail, a magical ark, and magical sacred stones the unrealistic one? And just to try to trick you into loving the George Lucasism,
I've got a bad feeling about this.
go fuck yourself!
What the hell is that?
A portal! A pathway to another dimension!
Yeah, Indiana Jones has now become a Marvel comic book. And the special effects are fucking awful. And then I guess God decides to blow the hat over to Shia, and it's treated like Superman is about to suit up or some shit. This movie is terrible! It's incredibly boring and lacks the charm and excitement of the first 3. It was clearly rushed to appease Harrison Ford, and it was pointless to begin with. Shia LaBeouf is terrible. The story and action scenes are basically rehashed again, except for... Alright, that's new, but it's still stupid. It's just a waste of time and money. And of course, Hollywood decided to try it again. Looking back, the original trilogy was fun and exciting, and there was never any need to bring the series back. But if you had to, it would make more sense to follow other franchises in a passing of the torch angle, having Indiana Jones pass it down to his son. Just recast the prick, and then the franchise follows him. But to continue having Ford in the lead despite his age is just sad to watch. We don't want to see an 80-year-old Harrison Ford continue to evade booby traps. Check out the new movie if you're interested, but I personally don't see it ever working the same way the original 3 did. And who's excited for the summer of Venom? Woo!